So, how's it going, everyone? You're welcome to another club leadership webinar series with the LGFA here. My name is Niall Ryan. I'm head of volunteer development for the LGFA, and I'm delighted to be joined by Aideen Howland here this evening as well from the GA. Aideen, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Aidan Howland, as Niall said, and I am a team member with the Community and Health Department, and my role is the Regional Community and Health Coordinator for Leinster in particular.
Thank you, Aideen. And I suppose tonight, guys, we're going to look at our critical incident response plan, and I suppose we're gonna give you just a wee brief account and an introduction to what a critical incident response plan is, what it looks like, and hopefully helping you figure out if you're ready for that in your club at the moment. So Aideen, over to you.
All right. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. I know it's getting into the busy time of the season, so making time for these types of things is hard. So thanks very much for doing so. And thanks for now to the invitation. So as you said, I'm very briefly just going to touch on some of the top level stuff in regards to critical incident response and the planning around it, what it looks like. And if anybody is interested in getting more information on it, we do have a larger webinar planned for April 15th, which will have a bit more detail and a bit more background and bits and bobs like that. So just bear with me now till I get my technology moving. There we go. So this is a very simple thing that we open any critical incident training with, no matter whether it's 10 minutes or 5 hours. It's just about recognizing that, I suppose, a little bit of what we talk about here is outside the norm of the association in terms of, we're normally chatting about games or results or referees or something like that. So this is just something to keep in mind as we move through the information that, we participate as a group. This is a space that's safe. So we briefly touch on some topics that may be triggering, or for those who have been actively involved in recent or any time in their life in a critical incident or what we define as such. If you need to step out for a second or log off and log back in, that's 100% fine. Just give us a thumbs up so we know that all is okay. If you do have any questions, there's no such thing as a silly question. It's better to ask it now than be unsure about it in the midst of an incident. And everyone's experience and capacity and capability is extremely different and varied, and will only change based on your experiences. And if something is shared amongst the group, that it's confidential, and that we treat that with sensitivity. So I suppose the rationale behind the critical incident response plan is just to demonstrate the importance of having one. And we all hope that we never have to use one. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have one in place. Very similar to car insurance or health insurance. We really hope we never have to call upon it, but it's good reassurance to have it in the background, should we be able to have it. And I suppose a big message we're trying to get across this year in particular, especially in regard to critical incident, is around reinforcing the innate ability of the community itself to respond. So that time during COVID, I suppose, was a really good example of this, when many GA clubs, LGFA clubs, Camogie clubs just kind of sprung into action when, things were shutting down and people needed shopping or medication or whatever it was. It was just that innate built-in response that we as a group, through our Gaelic Games experiences and clubs, just responded. So it's just trying to really reinforce that should a critical incident come to the door of your LGFA club, that the community, whether they believe it or not, are generally very well equipped to provide the recommended response. And kind of secondary to that then, or supplementary to it, is around supporting and reassuring those who've put their hand up to maybe lead on the response, that they're supported, before, during and after, that reassurance is there, that they're trying to do the right thing. Everything is done with the best of intention. So there's a kind of a communication pathway of how you can access that support that we'll talk about later on. And I suppose if there's one message that we all take away from this evening, is that we try to ensure that we target the response to the incident and not the incident itself. So there'll be a little bit of information passed on this evening, but if nothing else sinks in, I really would encourage you to let that one sink in, that, you know, whatever incident occurs, that we target the response to that, and not kind of react to the incident itself that occurs. We also develop the training just to ensure that responsibility doesn't fall on one person. So hopefully we'll get to take a look later on at what a sample kind of, our template critical incident plan will look like. And you'll see there's kind of a couple of gaps for a couple of different names. And experience has told us that sometimes, you know, someone may put their hand up to be the lead on the plan, and then when the critical incident occurs, it's actually that person who may be directly affected by it. So it kind of leaves the plan in a bit of flux. So logistically, it makes a little bit of sense to spread that responsibility where possible, as well as the emotional and physical capacity of people to respond as well. And I suppose the last kind of piece that I'll touch on towards the end of the presentation is just about making everyone aware of the supports that are available. So at the end of 2022, myself and my colleague Stuart Maloney, who looks after Munster and Connacht, we've done quite a comprehensive review of the critical incident resources that were first developed in 2015. And they've been updated to make them a little bit more user friendly and a little bit more supportive, I suppose, in the midst of a critical incident. So what is a critical incident? And look, I suppose it means many different things to many different people, but based on some of the expertise that we have engaged to support us in developing these resources, the definition, I suppose, that we go with are any events that are usually challenging, that have the potential to create significant human distress and can overwhelm one's usual coping mechanism. So that's kind of the definition that we work off. Just as a bit of an aside, I suppose, over the last number of years, unfortunately, our department in the GA's Community and Health Department has seen a nearly 100% increase in the number of requests from GA units, including the LGFA and Camogie and Rounders and Handball, seeking support in the aftermath of a critical incident. So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was around 25 to 30, and that has crept up to 50 or 60 requests now, unfortunately. I suppose a really important thing to note about a critical incident is that the circumstances can vary enormously, as does the response. And this is handled on a case-by-case basis. So I suppose one of the frustrating things about critical incident response planning from a volunteer perspective is that it can generally be a challenge to have a distinct answer to a question, because every case is going to be different. And it depends on, you know, what I said in the group contract there, people's ability, capacity, their willingness, the resources available, the experience in the club to react or to respond. All of those things will vary differently. And a road traffic collision in my club and the exact same type of set of circumstances happen in a club 2 counties over, and we might treat it very, very differently. So it is a frustrating part of it that there's no definites in a time when everything is in flux, but everything has to be handled on a case by case because every circumstance will be different. So some examples, and look, it isn't limited to this, but these are, I suppose, the most common or most unfortunate ones that we see, and it's death or serious injury on or off the playing field, exposure to the aftermath of a road traffic collision as an example, or some other traumatic incident that again overwhelms the capacity of club members, a close encounter with death, so any near misses, death by suspected suicide or personal loss or injury. Missing persons is also unfortunately becoming a more popular critical incident as well. So although this looks very simple, it is a very, very important diagram. And again, it's something I really want to reinforce around that community element and our innate ability as a community to respond. So right in the center of circle is the affected family or other at-risk persons. So that's when a critical incident occurs. Obviously, there'll be affected immediate family members, but that may also filter out into the community, into friends, relations, colleagues, whatever it may be. So they are considered other at-risk persons. In the midst of a critical incident, the GAA, the LGFA or Camogie, whatever entity it might be, we are only one part of what could be a very large jigsaw. It could be quite small. Again, it's on that case by case basis. But in the largest possible entity or incident that might occur, you may have the HSC involvement in the Republic or the PHA involved in the 6 counties. It may be a youth member, so there may be school elements there. You know, it could be a traumatic incident, so the emergency services are there. It could be a recommendation to a GP. There could be a religious service that needs to be organised or logistically supported. You know, there could be wider community groups involved. It could be looking at support services in the aftermath. So it's important to realise that no matter where we lie in the jigsaw, that it's always about the affected family and the other at-risk persons. So whatever decisions we take as a group of people who are on the critical incident plan, that any decisions made has to keep the affected family or other at-risk persons at the centre of every decision. So that's the second take-home message that I would really ask you to keep note of, that while a lot of decisions are taken with the best of intentions, it is always really, really important to take a second to think about, okay, if we take this decision, how might it influence the family? Do we need to ask them? We generally don't recommend that people presume they'll want things or assume that they'll need things. So it's always good to keep the lines of communication open with any other agencies who may wish to do that, and to also keep that decision-making process with the family in mind. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of lines of recommended communication that we would encourage once a critical incident has occurred. And it depends on, you know, what the incident is, how it's been handled, etc., etc. So as I said, these are recommended lines, and we found that effective communication is one of the key principles in responding to a critical incident. And I suppose that complements the previous slide of where we fit in the jigsaw. You know, we might have to talk to emergency services, to Gardaí, to PSNI, whoever it may be, depending on the incident itself. So being able to communicate what's happened and to know where to communicate it is really important. So, for example, let's say an incident has unfortunately occurred. It's reported to the club chairperson and the persons who are named on the critical incident response plan. So they are the first ones to, you know, hear about it in a formal sense, let's say, for want of a better term. At that point, then, the Community and Health Department in Croke Park, for anyone that doesn't know, we do operate a county structure. We have, in the majority of the counties on the island, we would have a health and wellbeing committee, and this would be chaired by the health and wellbeing officer, who generally sits on the county board or is appointed by the county board chair. And it would be one of the key roles of this committee to provide support in this regard. So if a club feel overwhelmed and that innate ability as a community to respond is proving challenging for the club, they can chat to the County Health and Wellbeing Committee chair, the county chairperson, whether it's Camogie LGFA staff members, who liaise with us all the time should they get a report of a critical incident. So we're there for that regard as well. And it's important to note that although the County Health and Wellbeing Committees are a GAA entity, they are within their remit to support LGFA and Camogie and Handball and Rounders as well. That's in their terms of reference. So if it's a particularly challenging case or there's a particular nuanced set of functions around it, then the incident may be reported to ourselves at national level. You know, it could be a high profile case, unfortunately. It could be a very well publicised through media, social media, etc. So a lot of counties and clubs do feel a little bit outside of their depth when something like that happens. So we have a good relationship with the communications department in Croke Park, who, if needed, can be called upon to provide that media or social media support in maybe some of the more high profile cases. But even outside of that, in terms of keeping records of incidents that happen with our members, we do recommend that if something happens, that you do contact your relevant LGFA staff member and they can liaise with us and we can keep records of it, just so, you know, we can keep our training up to date and we can keep that flow of information going. So when a critical incident happens, and as I said, the webinar on April 15th will go into this a little bit more deeply with the theory around it. There's a certain things that we support or we promote those listed on the critical incident plan to engage in. So when you're communicating with anyone, primarily with the family or other at-risk persons, but anyone involved in the incident, that we communicate calmly. You know, everything's done with a compassion and a level of warmth that we can muster at a time, and that we really reinforce that connectedness, that community level. So in a practical sense, you know, we've seen a lot of clubs who maybe experience a critical incident and they might open the clubhouse for a couple of hours to invite all members of the community in, just to have a cup of tea or a biscuit, or just to be in a space together as a group. You would see that primarily would happen quite a lot, but especially if a club loses a younger member, and they're trying to encourage the young people to come together in a safe environment that's recognised to them. Speaking with the affected persons with respect and dignity, you know, being very conscious that, especially if it's a traumatic incident, they may not have, you know, all the time in the world to be thinking about different logistical things, that we have patience with that we maybe think of all the questions or all the things we need to ask the family or the affected person before we try and get time with them and things like that, that we respect their privacy. There may be details around the death that the family aren't comfortable being shared on social media or club media. They may want to, you know, not have the death announced on club media or social media or anything like that. So it's just about respecting their wishes at the time, and it's recommended, I suppose, just in that particular incident, that nothing is shared on club social medias or any kind of online forums until an official death notice has been reported on RIP.ie. Or a formal identification process has been completed. So that's just a recommendation that we have. So once we've chatted with those who are directly involved, then it's about coming to an agreement on what the next steps are. And I suppose it's difficult to give a practical example of that, because you'd have to kind of go back and think of what the critical incident might be. So some of the next steps might be, you know, like I said, opening the clubhouse or the local community centre, arranging maybe a guard of honour, or arranging that communication piece, you know, speaking with other club coaches. It might be connecting in with your LGFA staff member, looking for some reassurance. It just depends on what the incident is itself. And then a couple of days, again, dependent on when the incident is, but the expertise or the evidence around this space, anywhere between 48 to 72 hours, if needed, signposting to appropriate help and services if required. So the important word in that is signposting. It's really, really essential to remember that as a volunteer, it isn't our job to provide any services. We aren't service providers. We can signpost. We have loads of connections with evidence-based services, HSE, PHA approved services that can be contacted to support people, or we can advise people in an immediate crisis to contact their GP, who is the best place to provide that recommendation or referral to any other services. So it's really important that we signpost and let people know where things are, that we don't recommend to, to engage in anything that is a service. So again, just to double down on, this message of targeting the response and not the event. And I suppose in this side of it, it's about understanding who cares for the carer. And there is several resources available on the Community and Health section, one of them titled Self-Care Tips for the Carer. And basically that's a document that we recommend. It sits alongside the plan, especially after the first time the plan has been used. It can be very daunting. A lot of people kind of jump into doing, and then once all the doing is done, and we have to maybe sit with the event and how we responded and all the different actions that go with it, it can be kind of a delayed response or a delayed reaction from those who've been giving all the care. So again, just to broaden that message, I suppose when the incident happens, we target the response. And once the incident has, maybe moved a little bit on, that we make sure we look at each other as a group of people who are named on the plan, and try and care for each other. And I suppose just again to double down on the fact that even if we're caring for the carer or we're caring for those who have been directly involved in the incident, that no matter who the person is that, in level 1 and level 2, that's where we operate. We don't move any higher than that in our volunteer capacities. So, we can provide information, we can provide tips where to look online. If there's any leaflets we can have in the club that people can pick up, if there's specific crisis helplines, and obviously that community support, that peer-to-peer, really reinforcing that message of just being there, being a listening ear, having that level of warmth and calmness in our communication, respecting everyone's grief is completely their own journey, and it may manifest itself in different ways, but we're there to provide that community level peer-to-peer support, and offer whatever information we can. Now again, as a group in a club who are tasked with being named on the critical incident response plan, again, it is not your job to know every single service, locally, nationally, internationally, that's there to help. It's maybe having the top 2 or 3 national providers, maybe 1 or 2 local providers, and just having enough information there to kind of give people that little bit of relief for that they can go and look themselves from that point on. So it's really important to not be putting pressure on yourselves to know all this information. And as well as that, as I said, the County Health and Wellbeing Committee are there. A lot of them, unfortunately, will have experienced critical incidents before and will be armed with a lot of this knowledge as well. So they can be turned to as a pillar of support, and they can further lean on us if needs be as well. But I suppose it's really important to, where possible, take confidence in your club's ability to provide that community support and be supplemented by local or national support services. So we've done a little bit of background and how we approach the situation, what a critical incident might be, etc. So what we have kind of done is taken a 5-step approach to adopting and developing your critical incident response plan. So these are the 5 headline steps. There's obviously a bits and bobs underneath, and hopefully if I can share the screen later, I'll very quickly show you what a template plan looks like. But the nuts and bolts of it are, I suppose, step 1, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, this designated lead person and a support team. Now, you might look for somebody in your club who may work in, the guards, or someone who might be a member of the HSE through nursing or, doctor or something in that profession. You may look to club members who, have a professional capacity to be the designated lead person. It's not essential by any stretch of the imagination. Anybody can take this position as long as, you know, they're willing, they have the capacity, they have a high level of compassion, good communication, you know, anything that you'd want from a good leader. That they can be the lead person. And again, to always have that kind of secondary lead person in place in the off chance that a critical incident could occur. That person could be away on leave, they could be ill themselves. As I said, they could be directly involved. So it's good to have that lead person, but also have the secondary lead and a support team around them as well. So the second step then is when you have your people who are willing to put their names on the plan, it's about outlining the key roles then. So what we would designate as the key role is obviously that lead person, the secondary lead person. More and more in this day and age, having a media or social media person tends to be quite beneficial. It's just somebody who has the sole responsibility for passing on the relevant information to the club. It's a source of, you know, trusted information, that there's not 4 or 5 people putting up conflicting information, that anything that is to be put out in the media is done through one person and all that information is filtered through that person. So, you know, club members who are maybe concerned or distressed know that, you know, this is the right source and this is the right part of information as well. Another really essential role is appointing what we call a family liaison person. This may be one person, it may be 2 people. Again, it depends on the incident and it depends on the relationship of that person with those who've been affected. So, you know, this person is somebody who may be close to the family and maybe, you know, is able to talk to them in their time of distress and ask them the questions that need to be asked and get the information that they need to get out of them. So I suppose that somebody can be named on the plan as that family liaison, but that can also change depending on the critical incident as well. So maybe it could be, you know, having 2 or 3 people in that role, and they can kind of support each other should an incident occur. So the third step then, I suppose, is once those key roles have been outlined, it's about assigning the potential duties of those people. So kind of repeating what I was saying, a potential is underlined here because, again, we come back to that case by case situation. You know, there may be a case where you won't need somebody to be liaising with the media. It just, you know, it's just your club PRO who's more than capable of managing the flow of information. But again, it's important to have it written down. As I said, you may need somebody who needs to liaise with emergency services. So if somebody has maybe experience with that, they may work in the emergency services themselves or have some form of experience with that they understand how that communication works and they can do that. It may be, you know, come down to the logistics of opening up the clubhouse. You know, who does that? What time do we do it at? You know, who's there to keep an eye on the doors and keep an eye on the people coming in? So it's just about maybe highlighting what the potential roles might be and having some of those kind of pre-prepared just to take some of the burden off should an incident occur. And then just to go back to what I was saying, I suppose the step 4 there is by identifying relevant resources and services that are available. And that can be, you know, national ones. I'll put some of those up towards the end of the presentation, but it may be some local ones that are there as well. So it's no harm just to keep an eye out. Again, check in with your County Health and Wellbeing Committee. Have they come across any services that they have found beneficial in the past? Generally as well, the Health and Wellbeing Committee will have a good grasp of local services that are HSE approved or that we have checked in with the HSE, you know, that they're, you know, evidence-based, that they're providing the right information in the right ways. So again, if you are doing a bit of research yourself, if you are that person on the plan and you have any questions about a service that you've come across, please always ask. There's absolutely no hassle in asking. Unfortunately, in the past, there has been a couple of times when people have identified sources to support locally and they have turned out to not be providing correct information and things like that. So again, there's no such thing as a silly question. It's always worth an email or a phone call. And then I suppose the last step that sometimes gets a little bit overlooked, but we really, really strongly encourage people to be active in this space, is around reviewing the plan annually or following an incident. If in the fortunate case that you prepare your plan and in the following 12 months you don't come across a critical incident, it's good to take out the plan again just to double check the people named on it haven't changed their phone numbers, that people are still willing to be involved. That's a big thing to review every year as well. If maybe some of the duties have changed or some of the people have moved on, some of the services might have changed their contact details that we list on it as well. So it's really, really important to do that annually. And in the unfortunate event that there is an incident, it's good to keep a log of the actions and any decisions that were taken during the incident, and this will inform perhaps how the club or the community members might respond should another unfortunate incident occur. So again, it seems like a small detail, but it's really, really valuable for learning, and also for, to make sure that you had the key roles covered, the duties were covered, and just to make note of how the decisions were taken, and what they meant as well. So what we have done is we've taken our resources from 2015 and we've kind of categorized them into different smaller bite-sized pieces, I suppose is the best way. So if anyone has their phone there handy, you can scan that QR code and it should take you directly to the suite of resources that are available for critical incident response planning. So they are that will link you to the website page. So if you scroll right down to the bottom, there'll be a list of them there. So for actual response to an incident, we've gone with the what to do, who should do it, and who to act model. And basically it lays out, a timeline of, in the midst of a critical incident, what you should do, who should do it, and when that is in terms of time after or before the incident. So just not certain this will work now, but no, I hope that has come up for everybody. So let me know if it's changed to
No,
the
it's still
screen there, Niall, is it?
still the other screen, Eddie.
Still the other screen. Bear
Still.
with me there. I will share again. So now, are we up there now?
Yeah, that's it now.
Beautiful. So this is just one of the resources that is available. And as I suppose I mentioned at the beginning, unfortunately, death or suspected death by suicide is one of the most common critical incidents we come across. So there is a specific resource to help support clubs in their planning and their response to this critical incident. So the resources are set out in two different ways. So this is what we call the detailed guide. So it is extremely text heavy. We fully appreciate that. But I suppose going back to my point around, that case by case basis and circumstances vary enormously, we tried to put in as much training and as much experience as we could gather to try and cover as many potentials as we could. So it just has some information about, just a reminder of that circle of community-based response, who might be involved, what's your immediate steps. It has some information around, bringing the team together, how to do that. It has links to other further resources that go into more detail supporting those particular things. It has, the different support entities there as well. All the different ways you can offer support or signpost. As I said, unfortunately, the media management and social media that section is getting bigger and bigger every year. A lot of questions we get will be around, that return to play or that normal club routine. There's support on that. And then just additional considerations or learnings, I suppose, that we have learned over the last 4 to 5 years around, you know, things like offering guards of honor, looking after yourself, and bits and bobs like that. So that's only a couple of pages long, so that can be picked up, you know, when you're developing the plan, or, you know, afterwards, or just as a supplementary guide as well. And I'll just show you a template then of, so again, this template is available at that QR code. It can be downloaded. It's a simple Word document. It can be downloaded. It can be personalized to your own club, whatever you'd like to see. So, as I said, it has that lead name place for the lead liaison person, and an alternative or the secondary lead. Those who put their hands up to being on the support team, that social media or media liaison. Other roles identified on a case by case. So that family liaison person, generally somebody who's known in the unfortunate case of potentially a road traffic collision or something like that. You may need somebody who links in with the Gardaí or the PSNI. You know, if in terms of, you know, it could be a suspected death by suicide, there may be HSE or courts of justice involved, that type of thing. So it may be dealing with, you know, getting somebody from the suicide support agency, MP8 might come in if required. We do a lot of interaction with the national offices for suicide prevention, who would have a network of officers around the country, can also offer support and information in the case of death or suspected death by suicide. So again, just a reminder on the plan for all the people named above to keep the family and those directly impacted informed and at the centre of any decisions or actions taken. And then below, I suppose, what we would call this is kind of the useful contacts from here on in. So you can put in your county health and wellbeing chair, their name and their email address there, who the county chairperson is, county PRO. These are the contact details for ourselves at national level. That could, you know, I could put in the relevant LGFA staff member there, whoever that might be as well. Again, this is all just a template. You know, you can include or exclude things as you see fit. We find these are quite handy to have, especially in the midst of an incident. If someone just picks up the plan, you know, and we have a couple of high-level emergency contacts to have, then, you know, people are generally reaching out to the same emergency support. So, you know, it's common, it's known to everybody. So where the nearest A&E is, where the nearest Garda station is if there's an out of hours doctor or medical service. The Samaritans, who have been our community and health charity or mental health partner for a number of years now. We also have yourmentalhealth.ie, which is the HSE online service for those experiencing or have symptoms of critical incident. And mindingyourhead.info is a similar resource. Both of them are mirrored off each other. That is available for those in the 6 counties as well. And I suppose it's important just to reinforce again that, you know, we're not service providers, we're signposters. So if there is immediate concern, you know, you're seriously concerned about someone, it's just a reminder here on your plan to contact 999, or somebody coming to you looking for more of that support in the triangle. So if you remember level 3 with that counselling via the GP, that's the area we don't want to veer into. We can provide somebody with information, and we can advise them if they are feeling in serious distress or seeking further psychotherapy or that level of support, that they have to speak to their GP to get that referred. It's not something that we can do, or it's not something that we should be doing either. And then just at the very, very end, it comes back to the date that it was started, so we know when the date review was. If an incident occurs, you know, you would put in the data review box there, you would say incident occurred on 25th of March 2024, review occurred on 10th of April 2024. So that, you know, you just know then that the date of a new plan would be done, and you would put in the 10th of April 2024 here, and you would hope to review it again then in 2025 and not experience another critical incident. So again, just at the bottom, the important actions to review the plan. It says at least twice a year here, but you know, annually is general, like ideally twice a year, but annually should be okay. Keep the plan up to date regarding personnel. That's really important. And again, it falls in that review. But you know, if you know somebody is named on your critical incident plan and you know they have moved on from the club or they've taken up other positions and they don't have time, it's just important to keep that in mind and up to date. A lot of people nowadays keep a picture of the plan if they're named on it. They keep the picture of it on their phone just for handiness. A lot of clubs do print it out and have it somewhere to hand in the clubhouse, hanging up on the notice board or whatever it is. But nowadays, some people find it's handy to have a picture of it on their phones. And then, you know, to send a copy of the plan to the stakeholders after each major amendment. So a major amendment is generally following an incident and with the log of actions that we've taken. So there might have been something that was done with best of intentions, but maybe wasn't well received by the family or something like that. So we take note of that and that we learn from it and that we show the relevant people involved that we have done that we've taken the action. You know, it was with the best of intentions, but in the off chance or the unfortunate event that something else happens, that we've learned from that decision there. So that's just a sample plan. As I said, it can be amended to suit your own club. And we really strongly recommend that every club try and gets involved in it. Again, as I said, we hope you never have to look at it, bar that review every year. But that you know, it's better to have it and be prepared than to be looking for it when it happens. So we're nearly there, folks. So yeah, so as I said, that QR code is there, and it's ga.ie/community and health as well if that doesn't work for you. So again, I just want to reinforce, I'm a big advocate of the reflection piece. It's really, really important, and I suppose it lends itself to that community support element as well. How, you might ask, but in terms of every time we experience a critical incident, we have to respond to it as best we can, and we'll take a learning from each incident that we occur. And over time, unfortunately, if you know, many of them greet us, which unfortunately some clubs and counties have done so, we learn a little bit more every time, and that case by case and that variation of circumstance becomes a little bit less and less daunting every time we experience. That is the unfortunate thing about critical incident, in that generally a lot of plans don't get made until something has happened. And clubs have to, you know, put a plan in place after the fact, after that first incident has occurred, and they don't get the learnings from that. And that's the first incident that occurs, we generally gain the most out of that in terms of learning and in terms of our response, in terms of the people who feel they're equipped to do so. So it's good to have the plan in place, and to be prepared for that, and to prepare to take learnings, and also to be prepared that mistakes will happen. And it's very, very rare mistakes are made out of any sort of bad intention. It is genuinely people who think they're doing the best, don't want to be seen to bother the family or people who are directly affected with kind of, you know, questions that are perceived not to be important or something like that. But it really is important to, you know, have the plan in place and be prepared to ask those questions and do everything as efficiently, compassionately, and as supportively as we can. So that's where taking the time to listen and reflect is really, really important. And especially if somebody does come to you after an event seeking support, it's about trying to figure out, okay, I've given this person some information, I've signposted the way to whatever the service that may be relevant to their supporting needs. It might be then keeping an eye on that person for a couple of weeks. If they're a player, maybe just saying it to the coach, can you keep an eye on, you know, they came looking for support. Or some clubs, maybe even in the the grounds of any of where you play your games. There may be like a mental health board that hangs up in the club that points its way to services. You know, you may perceive or see a few people standing looking at that board, you know, on a more regular occurrence than they were before. So it's just about keeping an eye on that person, and you know, maybe in a couple of weeks' time saying to them, you know, how are you going now? Do you need any more information? If they're still maybe struggling and saying they need some help, it's maybe at that point saying, look, you know, this is all the information we have at this point. Like, I think you might benefit from speaking to your GP. And that's kind of then where we step back. And then again, it's about reviewing and reflecting on the plan and updating it where necessary. So, you know, as John Dewey says, we learn from reflecting on the experience. As painful and as maybe not nice as it might be, reflecting on it, it really will provide us with some really good learnings that we can take into the next critical incident, should it unfortunately occur. So look, these are just a very, very small sample of some of the crisis lines that are available there. Some of them aren't even crisis lines; they're there for general chats, general listening, that type of thing. So as I said, Samaritans are our mental health partner for a very, very long time. Again, in this modern age, text about it is becoming an increasingly used service, where you can just text that number and you can have a text conversation rather than having to pick up the phone. Yourmentalhealth.ie and mindingyourhead.info are two really, really good websites, even for yourselves as critical incident response planners or developing your plan. It really is a one-stop shop for all the 32 counties. And as I said, the information generally mirrors each other. So it's good information to have to hand, and they do have a lot of information that's very well laid out for the different age groups and bits and bobs like that. And even they have links to healthpromotion.ie. So that's a really handy website where you can see lists and lists of resources available through, you know, evidence-based resources on loads of different areas. But they do have mental health information there as well, where you can order some things from the agencies and they can send them to you, or you can download them and bits and bobs like that as well. So that's just a selection of some of them. As I said, maybe a lot of clubs that you're in will have the mental health boards up that will have some of this information on it to hand as well. And that is all I have for you folks. That was a very quick whistle stop tour. Now there's a lot of kind of information thrown at you there. So as I said, if there is any kind of more questions, let me know. And also the full training event will happen on April 15th. That will give you a little bit more of an insight into the theory behind all the evidence and a deeper look into the resources itself. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Aileen, and really, really appreciate that, Aileen. It's very informative, and I hope anyone on the call tonight got a really good idea of what it is, what entails a critical incident response plan, and how to go about it. As I say, even if it was just a taster tonight, as Aileen mentioned, there is the further workshop on the 15th of April. So it would be a great idea if you enjoyed what you heard here tonight and you enjoyed what you saw, that to sign yourself up for that and register for that workshop as well. I just want to thank Aileen again for taking part in tonight and sharing that knowledge with us and sharing her experience with us, and for everyone else that came onto the call tonight as well.